So keep it. So good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is January, was it January 29th? But I'm still going to say Happy New Year. I guess I get a few more days of people I haven't seen yet in this new year of 2026, and hopefully everybody is digging out. I am Phil Brilliant from Brilliant Environmental Services, but also continuing professional education services that brings you this free hot topic program this morning. And we were talking a few minutes ago about how we love this program because it kind of starts the year off and gives us a good taste of what to look forward to. And I guess maybe, Tony, maybe we should bring it back every year in October because get to see how right you are. And the
That
test
part,
of
Phil.
that, yeah, I know, the
Yeah.
test of time. So real quick, just to go through some of the basics. I did ask everybody if you can just sign in using the chat. Use that for two reasons. One, say hi to everybody, but also if you have questions, comments, this is a meeting format, so you do control yourself, your camera. You can put it on if you'd like. You also control to unmute yourself. I ask you just to stay muted though, so we can keep through the process and not get interrupted. We are recording this. If you have a question, you can put your question into the chat or you can raise your virtual hand, which by now, 6 years later almost, we've all learned how to use Zoom and Teams and all these great um, platforms that we use every day. I'm going to jump in. Also with me is Julianne Masago, who's the executive director of CPES, who I always say she's the one who makes sure that we're in the right place at the right time, and could not do it without her. But I want to jump in. I don't see George, so he's going to have to wait till the end to say his 1 minute because we had a lot to cover because it is a new year in New Jersey. And I've invited Tony Russo, who is the president of Commerce and Industry of New Jersey. He's also the publisher and CEO of Commerce Magazine. And you can pick that up on any 7-Eleven newsstands and make sure to pay your full rate. So Tony can keep publishing it. So
That's funny. Yeah.
or your Wawa near you, whichever one works best. And what I always say, and Tony has a vast background. Is a engineer by education at NJIT. Made his way through the world of consulting. Spent some time, and I still, again, in DC for a short clip. I always butcher this with the Lime Association, I think it is, National Lime.
Calcium oxide. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, calcium oxide. I get
Yeah, yeah.
corrected there.
Not like the fruit. Yeah.
Yeah, not that lime. Uh, it's actually pretty funny. And it's been with CINJ. Was it 14 years?
13 years.
13
13
years.
years. Yeah.
And
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Tracy. Tracy hired me.
Tracy hired you. There you go. And all the way up now to being the king of the heap, and whether it's CIANJ, EBC, the Environmental Business Council, really an advocate for what we do as the environmental industry. And we're going to talk about a lot of things. It's not just environmental consultants here. It is a vast of people from different walks of life. Also, ask anybody who wants to give 2 cents in here. Again, either raise your hand or put the question into the chat. And we're going to jump right in because we are exactly 9 days since inauguration. We have a new governor of New Jersey, which means we have a lot of change. And so, Tony, why don't you lead us in and tell us where we are? How was the inauguration? Did you have a good seat? I know we talked yesterday, and we didn't see you in your tuxedo, so you didn't go to the galas.
I did not go to the ball, but Happy New Year to everybody. Phil, George, and Jules, thanks for the opportunity. I always enjoy these kind of programs because I think we cover a lot. And obviously, the more feedback we can get too, because it's a great turnout today. So my hat's off to you and the team there, Phil. And I also want to acknowledge, because I see Mike, a good friend and a colleague for many, many years from the state chamber. I'm sure he's going to fact check me today. So it's always good to have Mike on. And Tracy, thank you for hiring me 13 years ago. But I think, Phil, the thing that I always enjoy when there's a new administration is I remember growing up, when I started a new school year, right, you always enjoyed getting that notebook and the fresh pencils and the crayons, your anticipation of the year to come. And then by week 2, the notebooks are all used up, the pencils are broken, and it's routine business. But the nice thing is, obviously, with now Governor Sherrill, she's surrounding herself with a team, right? In the next coming weeks and months, it'll be interesting to see, where we go in terms of regulatory reform. She's done about 8 or 9 executive orders, which we could talk about already in her first week. I like executive order number 5 because it deals with regulatory reform, but we could talk about energy because I know that's at the top of the list. Lame duck, and Mike can tell you about lame duck. Lame duck to anybody that does government affairs or lobbying in Trenton could either be very good or it could be very bad, right? And I think the example with Dirty Dirt, which we'll talk about today, it ended up being very good for us, right? That compressed session that they have in Trenton. So, again, I'm happy to be here. So I guess I'll start with the people that Governor Sherrill, and I think by now everybody knows her background, obviously Naval Academy, prosecutor, attorney, mom of
Do you ever
4.
fly helicopters?
Did I ever fly in a helicopter?
Did she ever fly
Yes,
helicopters?
she flew helicopters.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting over the inauguration that after the cannons shot off,
Yeah.
they had about 8 helicopters going across Newark. But obviously she's she also served in Congress for 8 years, District 11, which is a highly contested race now on who takes her seat. But so she comes in, her senior team, and I think it's important. Alex Ball is her chief of staff. Now, Alex is a national figure. She's not from New Jersey. She ran her campaign. Tim Lydon, who I don't know well, but I'm sure Mike does. He worked inside the Democratic office. I think it was the Assembly, right, Mike, or was it the Senate?
He was executive director to Senate President Scutari, but I go back to him in the Corzine years.
Yeah.
But between Corzine and Scutari, he was a judge for a while. He left the judge.
ALJ.
Yeah,
administrative law judge. So Tim is the inside Trenton guy, but also a very important figure, and I'm sure Mike will agree. Somebody that I've only met a couple of times that worked for Congresswoman Sherrill is one of her aides was Kelly Duchette. And if her title is Chief Operating Officer, brand new position. There's actually an executive order that created that COO position. But if you read what she's going to be in charge of, she's somebody that I think anybody on this call really has to get to know, because I think Kelly, more than anybody else, is going to be front and center with a lot of the regulatory reforms that are in Executive Order number 5. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that proceeds. Other key appointments. Now, some of them have to get Senate confirmation. Some of them don't. For example, yesterday, Evan Weiss was voted in by the board of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. So he's now officially the new Tim Sullivan, if you will. Why is that important? Because EDA is the state bank, if you will, and they control a lot of the incentives, the grants. So Evan is somebody that we all have to get to know. Obviously, the DEP is somebody that everybody on this call cares about. Ed Potasnak, and I know, Phil, you know him well. It was executive director of the League of Conservation Voters, councilman in Franklin Township, chemistry teacher, also owns his own business, right? Contractor. He's now on the job for about a week. He does need Senate confirmation. I'm sure we'll see the schedule in the coming weeks. Jennifer Davenport is the Attorney General designate. She'll need confirmation as well. She's an insider. I think she worked for Matt Placken. It'd be interesting because people are like, well, okay, what's the Attorney General have to do with us? If you think about the Division of Consumer Affairs, that sits within the Department of Law and Public Safety, all the licensing boards, a lot of the ones that we care about, 450, are in the Division of Consumer Affairs. So she's a key person. Aaron Binder is the state treasurer, again, inside Trenton guy. I think he's a good choice. I think he's somebody that's going to understand the numbers and the complexities of the state budget. And then you have other ones like BPU. There's still a placeholder. I know Christine Sadavoy is still the president of BPU. Does the governor name somebody new? I'm sure she will. Maybe she keeps Sadavoy. I don't know. And Mike Marsick, if I say his name right, Department of Labor, is again an acting or interim commissioner. I'm not sure if the governor put somebody in labor. And then you go down the list, Phil. You got Human Services, was an outside of New Jersey guy. You have Dr. Cha, and then you have Dr. Washington, who runs Department of Health.
Right.
You know,
DMV is somebody from Colorado.
I'm from Colorado, right?
Yeah. And
And now
then I
you're
think,
dating yourself because it's really the Motor Vehicles Commission, but
oh, when I say DMV, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
MVC,
then right. And then the other thing too is Jackie Suarez is DCA, but
DCA.
she's a carryover, so she doesn't go through
Yeah,
nominations. Okay.
she
Yeah.
she's already not in
Already
an active
commissioner.
council, right?
Right.
So I think if you had to sum it up, it was a mixed bag of people that she kept in the administration, and then new people from outside of New Jersey. So all key people, all people that we have to start relationships with and get to know them because they're going to be important to our members for the next 4 years. So
And,
it's one of those things that we just have to. The other one too, and I should mention, we have a good relationship with her, is Priya Jain, who's the DOT commissioner designate. She worked for CH2M Hill. It's when I first met her about 20 years ago. CIANJ gave her a Women's Award, Enterprise and Women's Award, 3 years ago. I guess she has to resign from her consultant job at Mace, but she's going to be a key person too with the Department of Transportation.
yeah. And before we totally jump into executive orders and talk about A901, I mean, one of the things that was, I guess, challenged or was questioned during the campaign was a platform and specifics about, what Mikey Sherrill was talking about when it came to energy and it came to environmental and it came to business. We're only 9 days in right now. Do we see any new clarity? Have we heard anything? Do we have an idea of what is going to, because, I know in dealing with the former commissioner at DEP, we always heard about the fact I'm following my boss's agenda. This is the priorities. This is what I'm doing. Do we have any clearance on where we think or what we think the priorities are going to be of this administration?
Good question. And Mike, feel free to jump in because I know Mike was part of the transition team. But I think, Phil, if you go back to when she was running, and I checked her campaign platform, environment wasn't really at the top of the list, right? She had so many other issues, affordability, energy, mental health, social media, for children. So I think the clarity will come, and obviously her appointment of Ed Potasnik speaks volumes, right? Because at the League of Conservation Voters, he is an environmental activist, big on climate change. I know that's probably going to be something, from an environmental perspective, that she's going to focus on climate, energy, and where they connect, right? The energy master plan, if she comes out with her own. So I think the clarity will come for sure in the next month or two. But it's kind of interesting because, yeah, it wasn't at the top of the list, right? And
Right.
I know there was an op-ed piece that Jeff Tittle wrote about this very issue, about the fact that the environment really wasn't front and center. But I think we're going to get the clarity. But if I had to guess, definitely going to be air quality, climate, energy, and a lot of times the energy and the environmental stuff really can't separate the two.
Mike, did you want to add something?
No, I
Okay.
agree with Tony. I think the little difference will be I saw this more towards the end of the Murphy administration. He was sort of hands off and let the cabinet do whatever they want. We used to go in and try to vent our issues to try to get the front office to get more involved. And he didn't. He let the cabinet members kind of run. I think she's going to be different. I think she's going to be heavily involved. I think through Kelly, Tim Light, and Alex and her team, she's going to be more involved with her cabinet than we saw in the last probably 2 years of the Murphy administration.
Why don't we let's talk executive orders first. Let's go there.
Yeah.
And
So,
I,
yeah, I'm sorry, Phil.
I was just going to say, I know you mentioned number 5. Also, I think can't read my own handwriting. I don't remember if I think it's 7 relative to pauses on regulations. Those are the 2 I wrote down.
So, and I did go to the inauguration. I did not go to the ball, but what I found interesting was at the inauguration, during her speech, she did sign executive order number 1 and number 2 at the podium. So that speaks volumes. Number 1 was all about freezing electrical rates, right? Was
Right.
her mission now, through the BPU, no new rate cases, take a pause, take a look at how we can either shift money around to help offset the rise in energy costs. That was all about executive order number 1. Number 2, she signed too, which basically directs the BPU to start prioritizing and approving a lot of renewable energy supply, right? Solar being at the top of the list. And it's interesting, we could talk about it now because I think that's going to be her number one goal is, and I've been following this issue, I'm sure Mike has too. What is the energy solution, right? Rates have gone up. And I'll give you anecdotally, this was in June. One of our manufacturers came into the office. She showed me her electrical bill from June. It was 13,000. In July, it jumped to 25,000, right? So imagine that, right? 30% or whatever it was, increase. And I think when it comes to energy, and I go back to the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, or the PJM grid, that a lot of people don't know how that works. But it was kind of interesting, Phil, because a lot of people think, well, it's the utilities and we could freeze those rates right then and there. But it's more complicated than that. And I think for everybody's sake here, obviously in that executive order number 2, she's basically saying, hey, let's push solar. Let's push the modernization of natural gas. Let's do battery storage. Let's do all these other things that she wants to do, nuclear, right? But when you do the deep dive on PJM, now everybody doesn't know what PJM is, but it really is more or less the analogy I'll use is they're the air traffic controllers of electricity, right? 13 states, including Washington.
Right.
They basically are a regulated entity, but they don't own anything. They don't own the electricity. They don't own the lines. But I had a great conversation with one of our utility people that said, Tony, PJM started back in the 1920s where all the suppliers said, geez, well, you know what? We need somebody to manage the supply so they could send it here and there and more or less do. So over time, it's kind of evolved where if you think about how it works, it's all supply and demand, right? So the demand has shot up because of AI data centers. The demand, supply has gone down because we've shifted right away from coal, away from natural gas, right? Wind, solar. But if you look at solar, and right on PJM's website, you could see the pie chart. 45% of the electricity today, 45% comes from, or almost half, comes from natural gas. So you look at solar, it's still a small piece of the pie, right? And solar really isn't as efficient. And a couple of our companies that produce solar panels and recycle them said to me, and look, in my engineering degree, this was back in 1991, my senior project was solar energy. And I remember it back then. Solar is not as efficient as it could be, right? South Carolina South, where they get more sun,
right?
Like today,
Beautiful.
You're not going to, is solar going to be the answer? I think you have to really sprinkle in there small modular reactors. And there was a big public hearing back in August with Senator Smith, where, some technologies even trying to capture wave energy, right? So you're going to start to see a lot of bills around energy. So that's executive order number 2. Executive order number 4 created the Office of COO. Executive order number 5 is my favorite. It deals with regulatory reform. Again, the COO, Kelly Doucette's going to manage it. If you look at what that does, Phil, and the one team that I like that's going to be created there is something called the Regulatory Simplification Team, right? That team is going to be charged with looking at regulations across the board, every agency, and seeing how they could streamline it. Now, they're specific to housing and new energy projects, right? Our goal is to try to expand it. They're going to do things like a permit catalog, permit dashboard, just where are the obstacles. So executive order number 5, as far as I'm concerned, is probably at the top of the list. Executive order 7 that she just signed last week freezes everything for 90 days. So if there's any rules that were in the pipeline, the last, since she took office, nothing gets finalized for 90 days, right? She wants a full evaluation. So that's an important order that we have to start to track. So I think based on her executive orders and what she's coming out with, it's a good direction. I think it's just a matter now of us being involved and them putting together stakeholder groups and giving them good feedback on what works and what doesn't work. It's a golden opportunity if you think about it, right? So we just got to take advantage of that.
Well, I mean, I think you could say it's basically let me, she's taking on a new job. Let me evaluate everything that's on my desk, things that were left on my desk the past 100 days, the first 90 days going forward. We're going to evaluate everything and see what our priorities want to be and where we want to go. But just to be clear, so on the on Executive Order number 7, it's from when she signed it.
Yeah,
So and so for one example, because I've actually, it's funny today, all the articles hit on the real regulations.
it's
Okay, the
already
results.
adopted. Yeah,
It's
right.
already
So,
adopted. It
yeah,
predates it, and it's funny. You brought it up yesterday. I hadn't really seen a lot of articles, and today there's an article everywhere. You
yeah.
know, you know.
It's gone. I don't see
Well,
it
that
on
was
my end.
interesting.
Hey,
I
Phil,
I
Tony,
apologize.
I was going to add to the conversation real quick on the EO7 and the regulations. One of the things, Tony, you saw this towards the end again of the Murphy administration. Not only were you and I busy, with legislation at late hours in November and December, but there were all these departments pushing the regulations, including the PAC real stuff that I'm sure you guys are going to go over. But for me, there was like privacy regulations, wage transparency, the independent contractor,
Yeah.
ABC, out of Department of Labor, which interestingly, in all my years in Trenton, that had 7,000 comments, 7,000, and only 21 people supported it. And I thought, how is Rob Angelo going to, give the thumbs up and the green light to allow that to go through?
But he didn't, which is good.
But he didn't, which good.
Right.
But we were nervous because word had it on West State Street
Yeah.
that he was really working it to try to get that through.
Yep. Yep.
Tony, that impacts our both
Everybody. Yeah. Sure.
everybody. I
Yeah,
mean,
I was gonna talk about a lot of that, but you hit it right on the head, Mike. That's the good thing, right? Independent contractor was never finalized. We
right,
could talk about dirty dirt, but dirty dirt would have been captured in that because they
right,
didn't
yep,
finalize it. So if
yeah.
we didn't fix the problem, it would have been stayed for a while. But
I still think, and I know you're going to go over it, but I think Dirty Dirt got paused because of the work that you did in the legislature and your work with Bob Smith
yeah,
probably sent the message to the agency to throttle back on it. That's my
I'll
opinion.
share the story. Yeah, because it was interesting.
Yeah.
But I just, and I know we had that distraction, and I apologize, and I'm
I
sure
I
Phil,
apologize.
you'll figure out.
I think we're good now. So
Yeah,
I
get
locked the
active.
room. I locked the room. So if you leave, you're out of luck.
So I think it's important because Mike, the one person I forgot to mention, and again, he's a good friend because he was a member of CINJ
Dale
when he was
Caldwell.
at FD, yeah, when he was at FD
Dale. Yeah.
and President Centenary. And he said something that, when he was campaigning, he said, Tony, we want to do zero-based regulations. We want to hit the reset button. That's what those executive orders are doing. That's why I'm
Right.
always the optimist that this is an opportunity for us to go in and see what happens. So,
Agreed.
and
Yep.
whether a Democrat or Republican governor, to me, it doesn't matter. You look at it through the business lens. You got to give him or her an opportunity to say, "Here's, let's try to fix it." And I think that's the opportunity we have right now.
Yep.
So,
Agree. Yep.
Yeah. And he also will serve as the Secretary of State, similar to
Kim
Kim
Guadagno.
Guadagno. Yeah,
Yeah.
Guadagno did
Yeah.
under Christie. So let's jump in. Let's talk. So I started talking about before all hell broke loose. So the real rules, they're in place. That's not part of the pause, 90 days. Read one article this morning from Cape May, and about people who are probably going to challenge. They are very upset in Cape May. They thought they were unfairly treated. So we'll see where that plays out, but that's not part of the 90-day pause. You guys started touching upon it, so let's jump in real quick. A901, and I think everyone's giving them all the kudos. I'll give them the kudos too. Tony put the hat on early on, and I think his leadership and how he brought all the whole coalition together from across many industries in New Jersey, many different business organizations, and got it through the finish line. And his emails, as desperate as some of them may have sounded, were always positive. We're going to get to this day. And was it like 5 minutes before the governor walked out the door of the drum blanket? I mean,
so
take us
yeah.
through. I mean, I don't want to spend like a Saturday morning when a bill is made, if anybody remembers those days, but I think, tell us how we got there and how you finished it.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to, because I remember testifying on it back in 2018 or 2017, 2018. So the law was signed in 2019, right? But you have to take a step back. It was all because of what happened after Superstorm Sandy. Some contaminated dirt showed up in places it shouldn't have been. The State Commissioner of Investigation did a 3-year study and said, hey, look, legislature and governor, we have a problem on our hands because soil, unlike solid and hazardous waste, they don't have a licensing requirement, so anybody can get involved and start moving soil around state. So that's really was the impetus of it. And I remember in 2017 and 18, we said at the time, we said, do you really want to narrow the scope of where this applies, who gets the license? Because if you haven't gotten an A901 license, it's not an easy license to get. It could take up to 2 years. They do a 10-year look back. They interview your members of your family. You get the state police involved, the attorney general's involved, office, you get the DP. So what happened? 2019, the law gets passed. It was problem. 2020, COVID hits. The governor stays everything. 2021, he brings everything back. The DEP rushed to judgment, started asking people to apply. We looked at the law and said, wait a minute, you're missing something here. The department never issued regulations.
Right. And I just want to add in something from yesterday I thought about. Didn't have regulations, but started regulating with FAQs. They put FAQs out and they're like, oh, this is what you need to follow. So
this is what you need to follow.
Yeah.
Yep. So back in 2022, we started raising the alarm saying, wait a minute, the DEP is missing a step here. Legislation, again, Senator Smith at the time, back in 2022, again, Assemblyman Kennedy, and the Governor Murphy signed a law in 2022, July, said, okay, you don't have to apply for a license till the DEP gets the rules out. If you remember, all you had to do was register, right, as an entity. That worked for 3 years. We waited for 3 years for the rule to come out. Last January, a year ago, the department finally gets the rule out. Very problematic. We submit comments. They were done in April. I remember because it was Earth Day. We had the commissioner come to our Earth Day event. I asked the commissioner publicly, and he accepted. He said, yeah, let's work together to try to fix this problem, Tony. It was last April that I approached Senator Smith, and I said, Senator, I think we need to fix this legislatively, right? Obviously, what happens in April, May, June, it's all about the state budget, right? Mike, you could appreciate it because every summer the senator has a hearing down the Jersey Shore. It would happen to be in August, and he invites folks back to his summer barbecue. As I'm leaving the barbecue, Senator Smith says to me, this was August, let's try to work on something on dirty dirt during lame duck, Tony. So I'm like, great. So we wait till the elections are over. And then, and he has a great team too, Celia and Sadie that work for the staff there, Senate Democratic staff were excellent because I think it was November, right before the elections. She and I exchanged a lot of information. We got a bill drafted, right? I testify on December 1st. Still not the ideal bill that we wanted. It was a good start. Fast forward, the holidays approach. Now, Assemblyman Karabenchek on the Assembly side was perfect for this because he owns a construction company. So he's one of the few legislators that actually understands business. He introduces it on the Assembly side. We get word on January 2nd that he wants to have a hearing in his committee, not the Environment Committee, but the Regulated Professional Committee on January 5th. I go testify January 5th. January 7th, Senator Smith, asked me and another lobbyist to get on a Zoom call and try to work out the amendments. Who joins that call but the governor's office and the DEP? We spent about an hour going back and forth with the language, right? Broker, right? What should the de minimis threshold be? The rule said 15 cubic yards, 30 cubic yards, then you're in the program, you need a license. Way too low, right? I heard from the landscapers, right? They were part of the coalition. We got that up to 200, right? And there were some other things. The Utility Association got involved, right? The utilities didn't want to have to get the license. So all of this is happening rapidly on January 7th. And I never forget the senator says to the governor's office representative and the DP, you have 24 hours because January 8th is the last committee day, right, Mike? It was organized chaos in Trenton, January 8th, because I'm sure you were there as long as I was, Mike, 12 hours. Just hundreds of people in the State House. We testified on the Assembly side. in assembly appropriations. I'm getting feedback from whoever, Gwen. Anyway,
Yep, we're good.
We testify on a bill. Now, January 8th, I'm trying to figure out, did the governor's office and DEP, did they accept the amendments, right? And it was chaos. We testify in appropriations. We go over it, and I heard, okay, I think so, Tony. And it just happened to be, we were scheduled to have a meeting with Commissioner LaTourette that Friday, but then they canceled that. I took that as a good sign. I'm thinking, all right, maybe if he's canceling, maybe things are going to work out. Fast forward to that Friday, January 9th. I leave, nothing is posted for Monday. Monday to January 12th was the last session day before everything resets. Over the weekend, they post the bill, right? Now the Senate and the Assembly are meeting on Monday. The bill comes out of the Senate first, but it's not the bill language we want, right? So now I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. On the Assembly side, Assemblyman Karabenchek gets up on the floor. He offers floor amendments. So they substitute the bill, right? It's the bill we want. So it gets voted out of the Assembly, not one negative vote, gets kicked back to the Senate. Now, right, Mike, you remember it was 8:30 at night. The Senate literally had to hit the pause button. And mind you, Dirty Dirt was one of maybe 50 to 100 bills that the Senate was waiting for, right? It's just a mad rush to the end. And this is where lame duck could be good or bad. Well, I think it was 8:30 at night or thereabouts where the Senate agreed with the Assembly version, which was our version that we wanted, and they pass it. No negative votes, goes to the governor's desk. It's now sitting on his desk for a week. We're at the inauguration. It was 10:30. He has 2 hours, an hour and a half before his administration sets, and he signs it. So, case closed. That's where the compressed schedule actually helped us, but it was tentative because going back to January 7th, and this is where my heart sank a little bit, the senator during a conversation with the governor's office and the DEP says, there's going to be like 2 poison pills to this bill, Tony. I don't think we could do it. And it was one that had to deal with asphalt millings. And then I think the other one was an expanded contractor exemption, which that wasn't going to be a no-go. Now, mind you, if the governor vetoed it, conditionally pocket vetoed it, would have killed the bill, it would have started everything over again. And I said to the senator, I said, Senator, can't we just take those out? We've done a lot of work on this for many, many years. This is really not an environmental bill. It's a cost of doing business bill. It's a licensing bill. You don't want to have hundreds of applications coming in. You don't have the resources. It's going to burden our folks. And to their credit, they took it out, and the bill now is lost. So it's one of those examples where, you're right, and I want to thank the coalition, because if it wasn't for people like Mike and Ray Cantor, NJUA, NAOP, we had the Builders Association, we had the UTCA, that just broadened hey, this is a big deal, right? People need to pay attention to it. And obviously a lot of credit goes to Senator Smith, Senator Turner, Assemblyman Karabenchek, and to Governor Murphy for fixing it before he left office.
But Tony, the rapport you built during that time and process in that condensed version with Bob Smith is priceless. And now you can go into it, because I remember being in committee late at night with you the last time you testified. And even though there was a lot of back and forth, he did say to you, if we don't fix this right, we will return to it and keep tweaking at it. So look, credit really to you in keeping that momentum going. To, lame duck can be ugly or bad. I know past governors, their chiefs of staff would tell me they'd get a stack of bills. They literally cut in half of them, and throw them in the garbage and just deal with the ones that were, high priority. So
look, I agree. I appreciate that, Mike. I mean, I'm glad that it worked out at the end. And I think now, and the important thing to say now is it's not over. Now the DPS issued new rules, right? So, everything starts over again on the regulatory side. But the message for everybody on the call today is continue to operate as you've been operating since 2022, because right now we have a law in place that now the DP has to get out regs. And I think the broker definition, which was really the primary rub, it really helps us. The language basically says you are exempt if you hire a licensed hauler or somebody that disposes of the soil. And it helps everybody all around.
Right. And then the other thing too is, basically change the cubic yards relative to landscapers. So they're kind of out now. So it was a real vast change that came through in the last part.
Yeah.
So, okay. And, okay. Where am I? course, people, so I locked the room. Now people are calling my office and saying I need to get back in. Sorry, I can't trust anybody anymore. You're out of luck, as they would say. But so those rules they'll have to be promulgated, go through a process. We're probably a year out until we see something like
Easily.
that,
I think
especially
so.
in a new administration. Yesterday you brought something up. Let's stick with the DEP. We talked about new commissioner, chief of staff, new organization. We haven't heard anything about, and we haven't seen the org chart change anywhere else in the administration. But you kind of, and we're going to go back to something Mike just mentioned, is this relationship that you now have with Senator Smith. And you dropped something yesterday that kind of shocked me. I didn't know about it. And I made a note, and I think I wrote it right. You called it
The Reason Act.
the Reason Act, which I really like that. I don't know what the reason stands for, but any reason to open up Sarah is an interesting reason. I do see some questions coming in. We'll hit those in a second, but talk about what the Reason Act is and where this came from, and introduce people to it.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. But before we do that, there is
Oh.
one rule that we should talk about, because the Sarah amendments that were finalized, there was a re-proposal to exempt out the public notification piece that
Right.
now gets caught in that 90-day review. So that would have been a substantial change. That would have been our change, which means don't let the whole public notify the hotline, right, of contaminated property. So I think that's one we got to be careful on how that proceeds. But so the Reason Act,
before you jump forward, just to be clear, so the ARC's rules that came out before the freeze, okay, but they had
finalized.
They're finalized, but they had carved out that due diligence reporting requirement that we all were fighting on, and that was pre-proposed. That's the one that's now on hold.
Right.
Okay,
and that's one where even Senator Smith weighed in and said to the DEP, you don't want that. That's not the purpose of SARA, is to have anybody that comes across contamination to call it in. It really would have upset a lot of real estate transactions. So we're going to have to see if that continues, because that's something that we want to see continue.
And that may be one of the benefits of him being a land use attorney.
Correct.
So he understands that aspect. And before we jump into the Reason Act, Andy Robbins made a comment in the I think it's Executive Order number 7. It does say there are some exceptions to rules that will continue to go forward. Do we have any idea what those exceptions might be yet? Any definition on that?
I think it's only the exceptions are if it's a threat to public health or the environment, or something that legally would not be allowed under the executive order. But I think, to me, it's undefined at this point.
Right. And it ultimately would be determined by the governor herself and her senior staff. They would make that determination.
Okay. There's nothing there yet.
The Reason Act is, and I know I hate acronyms, but we had to come up with one: revitalize the economy and strengthen our neighborhoods. This goes back to an event we had with Senator Smith last June. It was called Revitalizing Underutilized Properties. We could all agree that we're all driving around New Jersey. You see these vacant properties with fences, and you wonder, why aren't those sites being redeveloped? Low-hanging fruit, right? Ratables for the township, jobs, things like that. So we had a great event last June. The senator was on a panel, and we also had Rutgers that did a study where they compared site remediation cases in New Jersey to California, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. And the graduate student, Sunny, did a great job. She's now at RU. She graduated. But anyway, we said to the senator, there ought to be a law, right? There ought to be a pilot program. If California, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts close out sites and New Jersey can't, that's a problem, right? Because again, I'm sure, Mike, you could agree, because we have members that are bankers, we have developers that are members. I could tell you, Phil, because we get so used, because we're in the environment. But when I talk to our bankers and developers, any property that they come across, right, and think about it from their perspective, they're going to pump millions of dollars into a property. They're probably not going to get that return for years to come, right? When you have to go through local zoning laws and planning, and just the interest rates, supply chain issues. But when you think about the DEP and the environmental part of it, right, a lot of sites are in what we would call natural attenuation or biennial certification, classification exception areas. You're chasing every molecule, right? The risk isn't there. The threat isn't there. So fast forward, we had a great call with the Senator Marty McHugh, who many of you may know, former DEP or now with GES. He and I spent about a half an hour pitching the idea to the senator. We said, look, Senator, all we want is a pilot program at the DEP where we could mimic California, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. And we have a lot of LSRPs on this call where let's identify the sites out there. And we did our due diligence. Out of the 13,000 sites in the program, we think there are 3,000 sites that fall into the category of, and I'm going to be careful here, I don't want to use risk-based. I'm going to use low threats, right?
Low threats.
Yeah, no sensitive receptors, no PFAS. Take all of those sites out. But there are sites that could be redeveloped if you could just close them out. What is the difference here, right? The difference is, and again, I'm not an LSRP, but when they issue that RAO and it has deed restrictions and it has all the other things, it gives angst to the bankers and to the developers. And okay, what can I do? It limits what can be done on a property. So he's willing to, and what surprised us was when we pitched it, all we were pitching was a pilot program, a bill. He goes, well, Tony, I'm hearing a lot of stories about site remediation, that there's been a lot of clawbacks with the RAPs, the remedial action permits and everything else. Why don't we just try to, if this makes sense, try to do a SARA 3.0, right? So I'm like, okay, that's even better, right? Now, what was his ask of us? He boiled it down. He's like, and you remember, he was the architect of it back in the early 2000s.
He was the father. He's the father.
He was the father, right. He said, come back to me with case studies of sites in New Jersey. We picked one in East Orange. And then he wants to know what the Massachusetts licensed site professional does, right, he or she, on how to close out that site and what the difference is. Because he said, if you guys could show me, what they do differently up there and how that expedites development, then I'll entertain it. Because he got the economics of it, and he gets the fact that everybody drives around, and you have all these vacant sites. So the ask that we announced yesterday at our Environmental Business Council meeting, and I've been working with the LSRPA, and we did have a coalition called, same kind of coalition that we did with Dirty Dirt. They're all interested in this, right? So it's going to be a long game, but I think it's something that we want to pursue. So we put an artificial deadline by the end of February, kind of collecting stories from Massachusetts, and then we'll go back in with the senator. And if we could convince them to introduce legislation, I think that's a good thing, right? Because I think this is an opportunity, Phil. You and I have had these conversations where, your professional judgment, right, LSRPs, sometimes gets questioned. We have 38 guidance documents.
We have more than that.
More than that. Right. And what happens with guidance, right? I've heard story after story that when the LSRP deviates from a guidance, you get questioned, right? So it really doesn't become guidance. So I think it's an opportunity that we have to kind of seize. I call them windows of opportunity. And right now the window is open with the senator, but we have to convince him that Massachusetts does it this way. He didn't care about California and Pennsylvania because we modeled SARA after Massachusetts. What are they doing up there that we're not doing? And that's the task.
Tracy's raising her hand.
Tony, do you want to put the same ask out to this group that we did yesterday if you have sites in Massachusetts? So that maybe it's coming in from other groups that we can also use as examples?
Yeah, so thank you, Tracy. So if you have an office up in Massachusetts or you have experience, pick those sites that didn't have, and again, up there, I guess they call it risk, but we're going to call it low threat, that have no threat or low threat. And send them our way. And this way, when we meet with the senator, we could show them the difference. And we're going to keep it simple. And then hopefully we'll get a bill introduced.
Right. And you just want to share why we can't use risk-based. And that's a no.
Because he told me from day one, starting last June, if you come in and ask me for risk-based standards, you're not going to do it. So we're not trying to change any standards here, right? And we said to him, take those complicated sites off the list. There are 3,000 sites that we think can be closed out. And this is the important thing, because I asked a couple of people that practice up in Massachusetts, and they're like, there's no, maybe I'm wrong, right? But there's no deed restrictions or anything. Like, sites are closed from an environmental perspective, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key here.
Yeah, there's no restrictions. Those are the sites they're looking for that they do in Massachusetts, and how they do it and what can they do in New Jersey.
So what I'll do, Phil, is I'm going to send out to our group, but I'll share it with the coalition. Coalition has the white paper with the Reason Act, and it's just bulleted, and it talks about what our ask is. But I was happy that the senator is willing to listen to us.
Tony, the timing is really good too, because we're not sure. I mean, Bob will serve out his term.
2 years.
The rumor is, does he retire the next term or win his election and then retire? But his legacy has always been ECRA, ISRA, brownfields, LSRP. Every 10 years, Phil, we revisit this. So he loves this stuff. And, opening that door and, is something that, I know he wants to have his legacy on. So probably the timing is great that you approached him about it,
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, and it's kind of a little crazy to think about. And I said it yesterday, what I call Sarah 2.0, I know some people call it Sarah 1.1, is 7 years ago. It was 2019.
Yeah.
So it seems like it was shorter, but we had something in the middle there that we lost time. So to reopen it, and I say, and not to breach any confidence, the board, the state licensing board, has been struggling with fees. The annual fee now is $990. It should be around $1,500 per LSRP based upon the budget, but we are spending down the reserve that we have. And we have a new committee now to look at what can we do, how can we fix this? Because if you start charging LSRPs $1,500 to $2,000 a year for a license, it's not sustainable. And we keep going back to Massachusetts, which has appropriation for their licensing program. And it is something we've talked about. And if they're going to open up, Sarah, that's something I'll put on, two hats as an LSRP, as also a board member, that we need to look at desperately.
The only thing I want to say, and I want to be careful here, because there's no guarantees here, right?
Oh, there's no guarantees. Yeah,
we have to go back to him and prove our case. But I'm optimistic with everybody's help that we can keep it simple. And if we show them side-by-side cases, that's really going to help.
Yeah, definitely. I think the cases are the important part to get it opened up. And then once it's opened up, you'll see where you go. But because again, I mean, and I agree. I mean, I'm an LSRP. The old joke, I think ECRA was the Environmental Consultants Retirement Act. Remedial action permits and are an annuity for LSRPs, and then they put a damper on project and property finances and long-term requirements. And it's something that if you have those low-lying fruit, and you can call it, I had to write it down, low impact. Is that
low
right?
threat? Yeah. Low threat.
Low threat. Okay, I wrote low.
That's
low
literally
threat.
out of California's policy. California.
Okay. Low threat. Low threat. Then you can close. You could really close sites and move them off the known contaminant.
Very important, because I think Mike was alluding to it. The timing is right, because we have a new DEP commissioner, a new governor.
Yep.
Because as we saw with Dirty Dirt, unless the governor agrees with this, we could run the ball 99 yards, but you won't score. Right?
Exactly.
It's like all for nothing. So I think it's up to us when we go back in through SHRAG or to convince the management there at DEP that this is good for them as well. Right. And again, it's all about the economy.
Tony, just a little nostalgic note. My first pen I ever received from a bill signing was from Governor Whitman at the Alcoa site for the Brownfields bill. I think it was 96. I have it in my office.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to working with everybody. I know it's a Herculean task, but it's going to be a while, but we just have to kind of manage it the way we did with Dirty Dirt, and hopefully we'll have a positive outcome.
Very good. Very good. Now, the only another question that came into the chat, just a side question, was interesting, was, as inaugurations go, this one was moved to Newark. Any feeling about that? Did it give you a different sense? You were in Newark as opposed to down in Trenton.
Look, I I don't know, Mike, what you think, but look, I think it's Governor Sherrill, signaling that she's going to be different.
Right.
Right. That's at the end of the day, that's the takeaway to me is, don't expect, expect the unexpected is probably the, way to approach it. Right.
The Mercer County folks weren't exactly happy. He was always at the memorial, but Tony's right. She's going to do differently. She's from, Bergen County. So with her, having the inauguration there at the PAC, which I was at, and I was at the gala at American Dream, that was her way of saying, like, I'm going to do things differently. And she even had, at the end of the night, Naughty by Nature band join her on stage. So already you're seeing a lot of different things that you probably wouldn't have seen in previous governors.
Yeah, probably some things we didn't need to see either, but that's okay.
Right.
And once again, I apologize for today, something we didn't need to see. So we have 7 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, please bring them out. But I want to touch upon. So we're 90 days regulation free. So we're everyone always judges people by the first 100 days. So I guess we're determining that we're not going to have to judge her in the first 90 to 100 days because we'll see where things go on rules and everything like that. But what do you? 2026. It's a new year. We just talked about conversations with Senator Smith about Sarah. We talked about A901. You and I talked yesterday, where the strongholds are now in New Jersey as to what makes the deciding factors. We said Essex County, Middlesex County, Union County,
Sure.
Really the New Jersey centrics has kind of changed here. We have the Assembly, the Senate. What do you think? And I know it's really early. What do you think if we come back in October, we're going to be talking about from this governor, this administration? And while you think about that, I think about and I listen to everything we talked about today and talked about yesterday. And I think, and again, I do know Ed, the new commissioner of DEP. He comes from an avenue that is very different than we've seen in New Jersey, coming from a strong environmental protection, environmentalist group. How is that flavor going to affect the entire DEP? And you talked yesterday about the budget. And,
I was just going to say, Phil,
how the budget is going to play in to what anybody wants to do in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think her first real test is going to be when she gives her budget address. Because to me, it's filter everything out. It comes down to, do we have the money to do the things that we want to do, right? So think about the dynamics, right? It's going to be her first budget address. Governor Murphy set a high watermark at $58 billion, which is the most we've ever spent in the state. Does she match it? Does she go above it? Does she make any cuts, right? Obviously, she doesn't have, there's tensions between her and President Trump, right, with ICE and everything else that's going on. Does Trump then turn off the spigot like he did with the Gateway Tunnel? The federal funds stop coming in. That's going to put pressure on, the governor and the legislature now to come up with the money. Is she going to propose new taxes? Is she going to make some cuts? To me, and I don't think she's announced the date yet when she gives the budget. It's historically been in February, but sometimes they go into March. That's it, Phil. What her budget's going to dictate to me where we're going to be for the next 4 years. And whether or not she makes cuts, adds taxes, where she's going to get the money from. And then the race is on from February, March till the end of June on what gets approved and what doesn't get approved. So, fast forward to October, you think about the dynamics of what's going on with the economy, right? And all the bankers tell me this all the time. Don't look at the stock market and think because the stock market's doing so well that the economy's doing well, right? I talked to a lot of our members, small businesses, and a lot of them are still struggling, right? They've had a bad fourth quarter. They're laying people off. Certain sectors are not doing as well as other sectors. So I think, again, I'm going to stay optimistic here. We got to give her the opportunity, her and her team, to make things right. She wants to focus on affordability, right? We're going to have a real estate event tomorrow. Think about affordability issues real quick, right? People's wealth. The majority of people's wealth in New Jersey are their homes, right? But yet it's a double-edged sword because the young people today can't afford the prices that the homes are valued at. So if we're going to tackle the affordability issue, is the intent to drop property values now? Well, guess what? You're going to antagonize a lot of people whose values are all about their houses. Yet you got, I talk to developers all the time. We drive around. Guess what the boom is, right? It's rentals, right? You see all of these rental units popping up everywhere, right? And so I think that's going to be a challenge that she's going to have to take on affordability. What does she mean affordability when it comes to housing? And what's the solution there? And I think that's going to be a challenge, in terms of even with the educational budget, the pension amounts, right? So I think her budget, right, Mike, would you agree? Her budget's going to say a lot.
The budget will be later because they always give the new incoming governor a little extra time. Corzine said it well. I was at a Politico event. He was there with Christy Whitman. He said transition is like drinking out of a fire hose. And then Whitman said the first thing the governor wants to do is get their arms around the budget and see what they're dealing with. I'll also add this morning in Politico, she was interviewed by Brent Johnson from the Star Ledger. And this was her quote. She said, "There was just a feeding frenzy in Trenton days before I took office to the tune of 175 million or so, which puts higher pressure on businesses. So we're sort of living in a moment in our fiscal decisions and not really coming up with a long-term plan. And it was incredibly frustrating. I just ran an entire campaign on driving down costs for everyone. And then the legislature and the former governor just blow up the budget at the 11th hour. So that's something I'll change." That's pretty, if that doesn't send a message about her being annoyed, like all this spending going on during lame duck, and now she's got to deal with it with the new budget. I thought that was pretty compelling, So wish her well.
Definitely. Yeah, again, I mean, we want to see success because success in Trenton is success for all of us and makes things easier. I am interested again, say it a couple times, how the DEP is going to respond with different type of leadership and what the mandate's going to be from Trenton. I do think we talked about this yesterday, and as we close, I mean, climate super fund, didn't make it to the finish line. I think we'll see that again. And, I know just, everyone can chuckle at me if they want to, but I think we'll see a cutback, if not elimination on, plasticware in our tailgating this coming year. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm getting silverware out to tailgates, but things like that are things that were important and you heard about in the campaign. I think we'll see some things like that.
Yeah, the other thing to focus on are data centers, right? That's tied into the end because Governor Murphy did sign a bill which requires now any construction of data centers have to pay prevailing wage. The other bill he signed was the BPU has to now evaluate different electrical rates for data centers. We have about 80 in New Jersey, and they're important, right, with all the AI demand that's going on out there. So Mike, I mean, her quote hit it right on the head. Stay tuned for the budget address because I think that's going to speak volumes about where we go for this year.
True.
I agree. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. I do appreciate, I'm going to apologize one more time. I got to figure out now to edit a video, so I'll be working on that for the next 2 hours. But Tony, thank you very much for your time today. Mike and Tracy and everybody who's here who had input. And we will post this up on our website, CPESNJ.com. And, again, any questions you have, Tony, thanks again.
Thank you, Phil, and everybody. Mike, good seeing you.
Thanks
everybody. Stay
warm. Pleasure. Yep.
Everyone stay well. Talk to you soon.
Bye.